impact.
Living in a memory.
Welcome in to Impact. And remember, on Impact, what we are doing is we are interviewing guys that are impacting the world. Now, not just the world, but we're looking for guys that are impacting their world. In other words, God has placed you in a time in history, in a place on this planet, so that you can impact your generation. And that's exactly what we're looking for on Impact. And today we have one of those guys. His name is Jeff Hughes. And he is a missionary, so to speak, I guess you could call it that, to high school, junior high kids all over this area. And really, you kind of extend out a little further too, right? So, Jeff Hughes is one of those guys that's making an impact in this generation for Fellowship of Christian Athletes. I'm really excited to have him on. And Jeff is one of those fellow gym heads, and he loves going to the gym as well. And so we're glad to have you in today. As a matter of fact, we've got to hurry because if I heard you right, you have to be over at the high school so that you can go lift weights with the high school guys.
Right. Yeah. Every Friday I go over. Friday night lights, football night.
Yeah.
And, so every Friday I have a routine of going over and working out with the guys, get their pregame lift in.
Yeah.
So yeah, I love doing that.
That's cool, man.
Yeah.
So, Jeff, tell us a little bit about who you are, where you came from, how you got to where you are now, and then let's get into what you're doing. And then maybe if we have time, we're going to talk about the culture of today's youth, okay? So tell us who you are.
Yeah. So I grew up mostly here in Atlanta area.
Yeah.
Went to North Gwinnett High School over in Sewanee. Played sports, everything that you could possibly play. I played, and just loved sports. Early in my life, I found God, and so I love God and love sports. You know, and those were sort of those two pieces were really the most important parts of my life, besides my family, of course, but. Grew up playing sports, and then I was fortunate enough I got to go to Berry College, which is an awesome place. You really get a chance to go to Berry; it's beautiful. And and I thought I wanted to be a coach, and actually was majoring in physical education when I first started in college. And in my mind, I was like, I need to be able to support a family. I want to have a family one day and a wife, and maybe coaching isn't the best route to go. And
here, let me do something real quick. Let me get you. Yeah. There you go. You have to be about a fist away. Okay, there you go.
My bad.
Nope.
So I decided I was going to major in business.
Yeah.
And so I majored in business, and when I got out of college, I spent about 25 years in the business world.
Yeah.
Mostly in financial services. Spent my life, supporting my family, raising a family. Had two kids. I have a son and a daughter, and they grew up playing sports, and so I started coaching them.
Yeah.
And found that I really had a passion for coaching and working with young people. I got connected with FCA in about 2009. Got connected with this guy named Bob Wiedemann here in Atlanta. He was doing something called FCA baseball.
Yeah.
And when I met Bob, I was like, that's exactly sort of what we're about. We talk about our faith with our kids, and FCA just had this platform that we could use to talk about Jesus and our faith, and try to be a little bit different in the travel baseball world.
Right.
And ended up taking some kids to the Dominican Republic on some mission trips. We did that a few times, and just began to support some local guys in FCA and whatever I could, and continued to do my business thing. And so fast forward a little bit, 2020, I guess it was. My daughter was playing college softball, and we're traveling around watching her play, and it was awesome. And we're coming back home from a trip. I think we were in Florida, and was a Sunday, and I just had a weird feeling, Jeff, that something was going on, and it was a weird thing. I told my wife, I said, I don't know, I feel like something's happened. Anyway, got home later that day, and the next morning I found out that my very close friend and my business partner, our founder of our company, had a heart attack that day, that Sunday, and she was 58 years old, and
so she passed away.
She had a heart attack and she passed away. And just a few weeks later, COVID hits, and we're all working from home, and I have a lot more quiet time on my hands, and still getting my workouts in and going on runs and stuff, and I just felt God was trying to get my attention during that time.
Yeah.
And to be honest with you, I would say I was what you might call successful in the business world.
Sure.
Had worked my whole life to get to where I was. And could have retired from what I was doing eventually. And Beverly had planned to retire that year. We had built a really successful business, and she was going to retire and step away from the business. And when she passed, it just hit me really hard. I've lost other people in my life, but I just realized, Jeff, that life is short. Beverly worked her whole life, and she was very successful, and she was going to go and enjoy life, and that wasn't able to happen.
Yeah.
And God just started using that terrible situation to kind of get my attention. And to make a long story short, I mean, this was over a matter of probably months, and it had probably been brewing a little bit, and I just didn't know it. But at the end of the day, the deal was that I just didn't know that I didn't feel like I was doing what I was supposed to be doing.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I was fulfilled, that I was significant in the world, and I was just trying to figure out what was going on, and my wife picked up on the vibe.
Yeah.
And I've been married for 30 years, and over dinner one night she asked me what's going on. I kind of sensed that something's going on, and she could tell I was in a funk.
Yeah.
And I said, well, baby, and I told her, and she looked at me and she said, well, if you could do anything you wanted to do and money wasn't an issue, what would you do? I said, really? And she said, yeah. And I said, well, I'm 53 years old at this point, and so I know what I'm good at. I feel like I have some leadership skills, and I enjoy coaching and being an encouragement to people, and I really enjoy working with young people, and I've enjoyed that in my life. And she looked at me and she said, you should figure that out, and you should do that. You have my blessing.
What an awesome wife, though.
Yeah.
I mean, because here you are, a successful business guy. You're nearing retirement. You've just experienced a dear friend passing away.
Right.
God used that to unsettle you.
Yep.
Your wife was wise enough to see this.
Yep.
And remember, guys, the wife plays the role of the Holy Spirit in the marriage, right? That's typically the wife. And so she saw that and was wise enough to redirect you.
Yeah, we had a moment which maybe I could talk about a few weeks ago, and I remember looking at her and saying, I can't believe all that's going on in my life right now. And she said, I can, and I still get a little emotional about it, but yeah, she picked it up and she encouraged me, and she sort of gave me the green light. So I'll be honest, I just started. I didn't know what God had in store.
Yeah.
I was comfortable. I knew I wasn't growing, and I knew that I wasn't. I didn't feel like I was significant, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So
Makes perfect sense.
So I just prayed. I said, God, you know me best. This is the prayer. I said, you know me best, and I don't know what you have in store for me, but I'm just going to be willing and commit to following your call, whatever that is.
Yeah.
And then the interesting thing looking back is I wasn't really scared. I didn't know what he had planned, but I was all in at this point.
Yeah.
And so, and I just prayed that during my workouts and on my runs and stuff, and I could just remember that time during the COVID experience of just having a lot of quiet time on those days, and I could just felt God working. And so we fast forward, I don't know, 8 months or 9 months. It was some time had passed. It just didn't happen. But sitting down with a friend of mine who's on staff with FCA, and some other
we're
things.
talking about Fellowship of Christian Athletes.
Fellowship of Christian Athletes, yeah. And and for whatever reason, he asked me, "Have you ever thought of working on staff with FCA?"
Yeah.
And in that moment, I knew that's what that was the door that God was going to open.
Yeah.
And I said, let's talk about that. So he came and met with me, and we had some conversation, and then I got connected with a lady here in Walton County named April McClendon, and I had lunch with April, and she was a director here in Walton County for FCA, and she told me, Jeff, she said, I've been praying God would send me someone.
Yeah.
And so I just had all these confirmations, So I have this really cool group of guys around me that I've just been fortunate to build over the last, I don't know how many years, but years and years of friendships, and some unbelievable giant men, some that business owners, pastors, just giants.
Yeah.
And so I had a meeting with all these guys. I called all these guys together, and I said, you guys know me best. I want to introduce something to you, and I want you to tell me what you honestly think. Be shoot straight. Tell me I'm crazy or whatever.
Yeah.
And so I told them all what I was looking at doing, leaving my business life and going on staff at FCA, and all that entailed.
No, let's time out
Okay.
here. Okay. So the reason why I said let's call a timeout, because you have financial security.
Yep.
In your business life.
Right.
Okay? Which every man, that's their dream. As a man, you get a lot of self-worth from being the provider. That's the way we're hardwired. God hardwires us this way.
Right.
And you also have a wife and a family.
Yep.
Who the wife, one of her basic needs as a woman is to feel secure.
Yep.
And so now you are going from a secure life, something that you have, thought about, planned out. Here you are. You're executing that plan into retirement, and then God unseats you, unsettles you, and now you are thinking about jumping out into the deep end of the pool of faith,
Right.
where there's no money.
Right.
There's no money here, guys. I mean, you've got to figure out, okay, God, if this is you, then where God says to go, God provides the way.
Absolutely.
So I just want to set that stage so people understand.
Yeah.
We're talking about a successful businessman now going to where there's no money.
Yeah, so just a little side note, when you look at going on staff with FCA, one of the parts of that piece is you mentioned, like a sort of like a missionary.
Yeah.
And if you know anything about, missionaries, they raise their support.
They raise their support.
Right. So it's the same thing with FCA. You have to raise your financial support.
Yeah.
So on the backside, one of the things we did was, with April, when I sat down with her, is we put together a budget, what my budget would look like. And it was a big number when I hit total, and I was like, wow, I've got to raise that amount of money, And
Now that's per year.
Per year, yeah.
Yeah.
It was over $100,000. I don't mind saying,
Yeah.
Of what my budget was going to be, and so again, I just said, God, if that's what you want me to do, then I will put together a plan. And if you don't want it to happen, the door will close and it won't happen.
Right.
And so I went fully into it that way. But a little side note is I worked my whole life and tried to not ever ask anybody for anything.
Sure.
So that was a a piece that I had to kind of understand that this is what I was going to have to do to make this vision a reality.
So
anyway.
Now you're meeting with these guys.
Yeah.
Let's go back there. You're meeting with these guys.
Right.
You have no idea what anybody's going to say.
Right.
I mean, for as far as you know, they might all go, dude,
You're
are
crazy.
you crazy?
Right.
But here's one of the things I want to point out is when you have major life decisions, you always seek, according to God, you always seek wise counsel.
Right.
And here is what is so important for us to understand. You don't go seeking young men's counsel. You go to men that have wisdom and life experience. And this has been the problem with a lot of guys. We just heard of somebody yesterday that was going to a counselor that is not much older than her. Mm-hmm. And we were like, she's got no life experience. How is this girl going to? Well, she went to college. Right. So, guess what? I went to college, and I went to college to be a pastor, and guess what? Once I got into the ministry, you know what I found out? That diploma on my wall that degree on my wall, it doesn't prepare you to be a pastor.
Right.
Right? So it's OJT, on the job training.
Yeah.
So you're meeting with these guys. Tell us what happens.
Yeah, the cool thing is, with, sidebar to what you're talking about, I think God put all these guys in my life, and a lot of them were older than me,
And these are not yes guys. I know some of the guys you're talking about.
Yeah, these are like I said, giants, and so I went around and I asked them all. I said, I want everybody to go around and speak. I want to hear from everybody, and so everybody went around the room, and it was so awesome, Jeff, because they all said that's what you should be doing.
Yeah.
Unanimously.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you should be doing. Not only that, but we will help you and we will support you.
Mm-hmm.
So I knew I had I think it was about 12 guys. I knew I had 12 guys that were going to support me and help me and pray for me. Mm-hmm. And so, and I should also say, talking about decisions, and I firmly believe in seeking counsel when you're doing that. Prayer, seeking counsel.
Yep.
And not making an emotional decision.
Yeah.
This wasn't an emotional decision. This was a very, thought out, mapped out process.
Yeah, prayed out. I remember when all of that came about. I remember actually praying for you about that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, I remember we did. One of the things that's so important that you just said is you didn't make an emotional decision.
Yeah.
And this is where a lot of people mess up. I used to teach people, never make a decision when your decision maker is broken.
Right.
When you're in the midst of turmoil or something like that, you don't make a big life-changing decisions in the middle of that.
Right.
Now, unless you feel God is moving you in a direction, and that's when, just like you did the wise thing to do. That was seek God, seek wise counsel.
Right.
First thing you did was seek your wife's counsel,
Right.
which nobody knows us best like our wives.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's irritating.
Yeah.
You all of a sudden you're like, golly, man, how does she know me so good? you know? But that's so smart. And so you go to these guys. All of these guys are for you.
Yep.
Now, you've raised your support. Where do you go from there?
Well, yeah, so I should talk about that.
Yeah,
if I can. So that was this was 2020, and again, just sort of mapping out the steps. The next step was to sit down with my business partners, my team, and so I prayed long and hard about that as well. Then I met with my guys, and this is how I'm thinking of going about this conversation, and and together. We put together sort of talking points, and also prayed, and they prayed for that meeting. And so I went in and met with my business partners, my leadership team, I guess you could say, at our company, and that went so well. They said, not only do we think that's what you should be doing, Coach, because a lot of people know me as Coach, and Beverly called me Coach a lot, and but we'll help support you as well.
Yeah, dude, that's your nickname. It's
yeah.
I love that because, your name is Jeff Hughes.
Yeah.
Everybody knows you as Coach.
Yeah.
There's your sign, bro.
Yeah, there's my sign.
That is so cool though, because when you really start to think about it, it's like God told you years and years before.
Ago. Yeah.
And it just took time, because remember, God's will in God's time is perfect.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Here's the thing. God's will not in God's time is not God's will.
Yeah.
Right? And so you waited, and when God was ready, God stirred you to that. Yeah. And it's so important when you're talking about God's will, people go, "Oh, I just don't know, what does God want me to do?" Start at your passion.
Yeah.
What has God given you a passion for? And God gave you a passion for this. Yeah. And God equipped you for such a time as this. And so now here you are in the middle of God's will. You're finding comfort. You're finding peace. Even though your life is about to upend financially and all of that stuff. And let's be real. For anybody from the outside looking in that is not involved with your story, and anybody outside looking in that especially is not a Christian, they're gonna say, dude's nuts.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, dude's nuts. But you throw it all in, you go all in with God.
I did.
Now what happens?
So so I start sitting down with people and explaining my story and my vision, and in about 8 months or so, I had funded the budget.
Yeah.
And I remember getting close to Christmas, and I was a little ways away, what I would consider a significant amount of money away from the goal.
Mm-hmm.
And I had ultimately I had planned to leave my office, my business, the last time in January 1st of 2022. And getting close to Christmas, I was like, man, I'm short. And I remember jumping in the shower and taking a shower, and I just felt God's Holy Spirit presence, and He says, I've got this.
Yeah.
And I remember it vividly. And I got out of the shower, and later that day, I think it was, one of my best friends in life, who's part of that group, called me, and he said, "Where you at?" His name's Bobby, and he said, "Where you at?"
Yeah.
I told him, and he said, "Well, Claire and I have just been kind of waiting. We wanted to be we wanted to close the deal, And I was like, wow, and God showed up, and I was like, January 7th, 2022, I walked out of the office for the last time.
See, now I'm over here getting emotional.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome.
Because it's, look, man, when it's a God-sized project, God has to come through in a God way.
And He did, yeah.
And I just love stories like that, because, when, you look at your life, man, and you're like, God, there's no way this can happen.
Mm-hmm.
And God said, yeah, you're right.
There was a time in my life I would have been like, I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
I'll be honest.
Yeah.
And God used. I told Beverly's husband Scott at church. I had a bunch of guys at church with me last Sunday, and I said, look over there, and I said, that's part of Beverly's legacy.
Yeah.
I'd use that to sort of get me out of my comfort.
Yeah.
And make this happen. And I mean, it was just another reaffirming or confirming part of the process, that when you say yes to a God-sized goal, and the only way you can achieve that goal is with God.
Yeah.
It's a cool place to be.
Yeah.
I'll be honest.
Oh, it is. Yeah.
And if you haven't been there, it's hard to explain. But
you know how I explain it? I do this to people all the time. I'm like, dude. Like we just started another company, and dude, I told my business partner, I said, I believe God's moving me in a direction, and he's like, yeah, I'm in. And so we went all in, and I told him, just like we just said a few minutes ago, dude, if you look at most Christians, they stay in the shallow end.
Yeah.
Especially in Western culture.
I was in the shallow end.
Yeah, we stay in the shallow end. Now you venture out into God where your feet don't touch. Right. And you start pulling a Peter, and you go, oh, Lord, save me, I'm drowning. And God says, I got you, man.
Yeah.
Because if it's God's pool, God's that lifeguard, and God's that one that keeps you afloat. And I love this, and I will say this to you, and we talked about this yesterday with a friend. I said, listen to me. Just because God calls you to something doesn't mean there are not going to be times where things are not rough. Right. But if God calls you to a thing, God supplies for that thing. Yeah. Now, what happens is when we get through the emotion of that thing, then what happens? Now we're flatlining on the emotion, and then the enemy goes in and he starts to try to get you distracted from the thing that God called you to. And so you never doubt in the darkness what God showed you in the light. And when you get to that messy middle, when you get to that part of life where now you're having to do the discipline of the thing, then that's where God steps in and renews your passion for it and for Him. And see, here's the thing that happens when it comes to a lot of guys serving God, man. We get out there into the deep end, and then once you get there, you start learning how to tread that water. You feel like by yourself, and hey, man, I'm doing okay. God, I don't need you anymore.
Yeah.
And then what happens? God says, okay, you got it. I'm gonna let you go. And
Right.
so I love to see that, and I love to see that passion, and that God's brought you to this. So tell us more about. So now you are involved in FCA.
Yep.
You're a missionary.
Yep.
You're out there in the deep end of faith. Now you've got to go and you've got to actually start interacting with young people. What does that look like for you, and where are you doing that?
Yeah. So one thing I got to tell you a little bit about me as I jump into that. So
Yeah.
I was talking with someone last night at a wedding I was at, and she said to me, I can't imagine you being sort of a shy person, And my wife, who is the life of a party, every party you go to, she could go out on the dance floor and just have a good time.
Yeah.
And me, I'd just be happy sitting over on the side, And
I'm the same way. I'm with you, brother.
Naturally, that's the way I am. But I told her that when you're doing your purpose, it's bigger than any fear.
Yeah.
And so I am not the same person that
Yeah.
I used to be even 2 years ago.
Yeah.
Part of that was asking folks to support me and
Mhm.
learning how to, just having to share my vision and stuff, but and sort of getting out of that, again, that comfort zone. But so I have to share that, and there's so many things that I've learned through this process. And one of those I got to share is, when you fully commit to God, He will fully fulfill you.
Yeah. That's
So,
great.
So I went from not feeling significant or fulfilled to saying yes, to following His plan, to seeing it come together, to just feeling fully fulfilled
That
every
is
day.
so good. Let me ask you. I want you to speak to that person out there that honestly, Jeff, they're like, man, I want to do something for God. I
Yeah.
don't know what. Where do they start? And now we talked about start at your passion, right?
Yeah.
But let's say that person out there doesn't feel fulfilled.
Yeah.
What and what would you say to that person?
I think it's a big question, and I think a lot of guys deal with that.
Yeah.
To be honest with you.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just my take on it. I think a lot of guys feel like, okay, I'm going to support my family, take care of my family. Maybe they're doing a job that, they hate, but they're doing it
Yeah.
because, it takes care of their family or whatever, and they do the 9 to 5 grind,
Right.
if you will, or 8 to 8 grind or whatever.
Yeah,
it is,
you know what? Let me tell you something. You know what I used to call that? I used to call that the same old disease.
Yeah.
You get up the same old time every day. You go out and you eat the same old breakfast with that same old wife, and
Yeah.
and then you go to that same old job and grind in that
Mhm.
same old office and work for that same old boss and come home late to that same old house,
Yeah.
to the same old kids, that same old wife, go to bed the same old time, only to get up and do it the same old way the next day.
Yep.
And you feel like you have no purpose, and your life is just declining, and your relationship is declining. You're just doing the same thing all the time.
Yeah.
And dude, that's where the devil just beats guys up, especially as they start getting older. You start to realize it wasn't all about
Yeah.
meeting financial goals and the American dream and all. There's got to be more in life.
Yeah.
And you, dude, you went out and said, okay, God, you went through the same crisis of faith, man.
Yeah.
God, there's got to be more for me. And God,
Well, I knew that.
Yeah.
I mean, I knew that all my life. I felt like, Jeff, that God had a plan for me my whole
Yeah.
life. I really did. And
Beyond making money.
yeah, and I just didn't know what it was.
Yeah.
And I thought maybe it was business. I
Yeah.
tried a business when I was younger, and it didn't go well, but I learned a lot and I worked
Yeah.
hard. But yeah, I think this is a question that a lot of guys face. And
What would you say to that guy?
my answer to the question is, first of all, God created you. You're special. And I tell athletes and coaches this every chance I get.
Yeah.
He knew you before you were born.
Mhm.
That's pretty cool to think about.
Yeah.
And He has a plan for you. And for me, what I learned is that I just needed to say, God, you know me best. What plan do you have for me? I'm going to say yes to that.
Dude, that is such a great prayer.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, that is such a great prayer that I don't think a lot of guys ever get around to, because they have set so many mechanisms up in their life, Jeff, that keep them busy, and yet they don't feel fulfilled,
Yeah.
but they keep grinding because these mechanisms are in place that keep them having to constantly keep those things running, and they never feel fulfilled in life. But tell us that prayer again. That is so good.
God, you know me best.
God, you know me best.
You know me best, and whatever you have planned for me, I'm willing to
And
follow you.
show me what it is.
And I think, Jeff, one thing for me, that if I had to say something that I probably struggled with in my life is pride and ego.
Yeah. Haven't we all?
And you gotta put that aside. And that's one thing that I've really worked hard to try to put aside. I think as you get older, and maybe if you haven't reached your goals and dreams, you get bitter, and things set you off. And if I'm being honest, there were probably times when I was, probably not the best at keeping my temper, and but one of the things that I've learned is when you get into what you're supposed to be doing, again, that all changes.
Yeah.
And I had a friend through this process of sitting down with people and sharing my vision and stuff. Tell me he was my age, and he was like, I'm just kind of holding on until I can retire.
Yeah.
And that stuck with me. I'm just trying to hold on, and I never wanted to be in that place. One of the firm things that I really believe, and maybe this is from my weightlifting days and stuff, but if you're not growing, you're not really fully living.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
And so life is about growing.
Yeah.
Whatever age you are.
And it doesn't stop just because you're 50.
That's what I was about to say. You read my mind. You can be 55 and like me and still growing.
Yeah.
And I'm being challenged every day, and I'm growing every day. And what's
cool.
And,
dude, I watch you. It's really neat to watch you because I come into the gym. We just joined the gym we used to go to. We hadn't been there in 6 years, because we were just completely out of bodybuilding.
Right.
And I'm not back in bodybuilding. That's not what I'm saying. But we decided it was okay to go back to that gym. And saw you in there, and I was like, man, Jeff looks good, man. You look young. You look like you have an air about you that I really like, because I can tell working with these young people, it keeps you on top of your game. Not just lifting, but dude, I see a guy that is operating inside the will of God, and not just operating inside God's will, but joyfully operating in God's will. Now, it doesn't mean everything is great and sunshine and roses all the time, okay?
Right.
That's not what we're saying. But, dude, there's you can see that difference, And when you're in the gym and you see different guys in there, and you have any sort of spiritual discernment about you, you can see guys that are just grinding in life. You know what I mean? Or anywhere. Just guys that are just grinding, and, so it's good to see.
I appreciate that. I mean, I believe you got to be fit in all your areas of life, and physical is one of those.
Yeah.
And I want to have the endurance and the energy to do what I do every day.
Yeah.
I have a full day. I was going to say a minute ago, I get to do a lot of cool things.
Yeah. Yeah, you do.
I don't have to do, but every night I go to bed and I say, wow, what a day. Like last night I got to serve and help officiate a wedding of a former player of mine that I used to coach, and I went to bed going, wow, I got to do that today.
Yeah.
And today I get to go be with guys on a football game under the lights on Friday night, and I get to come and speak with you. And I know tonight I'll get to go home and say, well, I got to do some cool things tonight. And tomorrow I get to do some cool things again. So, it's really awesome. But
and by the way, I'm looking forward to coming and speaking to those guys. I know we were going to, and then we had a problem with it.
We'll make it happen.
I hated that.
They were excited to hear. In fact, they were asking me when were you coming. So,
yeah. What time are you going over to the weight room?
So every day, every Friday,
Yeah.
I go over about 1 o'clock and work out with the guys. We actually have a pretty good workout that we do on Fridays.
Yeah.
We have an awesome strength coach over at Loganville, and I enjoy doing that workout with him. So it goes from about 1 to about 2:30.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then we get ready for the game.
Yeah.
Today I'll be with Walnut Grove football team. They're traveling, and Loganville's off. So, but you want to jump in a little bit about what I do every day?
Let's do that, because I wanted to make sure that we find out what does an FCA guy
Yeah.
that works with you, what do you do on a
Yeah.
daily basis, man? How are you impacting these kids? And tell us some examples of that.
Well, first of all, I want to say what FCA, a little bit about FCA. FCA is a sports ministry.
Yeah.
It's the oldest sports ministry. It's a national ministry now.
All over the United
All
States.
over the U.S. and,
Yeah.
and all over the world now.
Oh, is it?
Yeah, it's all
oh,
over the world.
wow.
We have,
International.
we're an international organization now, and ultimately our mission is to lead every coach and every athlete into a growing relationship with Jesus Christ and His church. And that's a big mission.
Yeah.
And that's who we are. We do that with a strategy we call E3. So we want to engage, equip, and empower coaches and athletes. We want to engage through relationships and just being consistent. So I show up at school every day.
Yeah.
During the fall, I'm with the football team every day.
Yeah.
I try to plug into all the different sports. Football is just to me, it's the biggest, most diverse group.
Yeah.
Coaches and athletes. And I don't know, being a former football player, it's just a sport that I love, and I feel like I can connect with those guys.
Absolutely.
But in the winter, I'll be with the basketball teams.
Now, you're not much of a basketball player, are you?
I was okay. I played in high school a little bit, but I was a really good football and baseball player.
You like me? I played all the sports in high school too, but
how'd you know that?
My coach only put me, because you like me, man. I can tell. My coach put me in, and he would tell me, I want you to use all your fouls on that guy right there.
Yeah. I was a good defensive player.
I was a great fouler. Go ahead.
But my daughter was a really good basketball player. She could have played in college, but she chose softball. But and in the spring, I actually get to coach through this process. Sit down with a friend of mine who's a coach over at Georgia Walton Academy here in the area, and he said, hey, I could use some help coaching. And so if you go back to that original conversation with my wife, what could you do if money wasn't an issue? Part of my answer was I love coaching, and I didn't know God had that in store for me, but I get to coach baseball in the spring. But again, our E3 strategy is to engage, equip, and empower. So ultimately, what I try to do is be consistent and be present in the lives of the athletes and coaches in our community.
Can I ask you something? And the reason why I'm asking this is, how big of an issue is that for not you, but for those kids? Because a lot of these kids don't have dads in the home.
Yeah.
I mean, are you finding that?
Yeah, there's a lot I would say a lot that do. I've seen all kinds of different things going on with kids at home, and even kids that have great home lives.
Yeah.
We started. One of the things we do is we have camps with FCA. We have camps in the summer. We have camps in during the winter break. We had a camp in the summer we call leadership camp, and I had this awesome young man named Jason, who's one of the best football players on the Loganville football team, one of the strongest guys in the weight room, and also he's class president, he's homecoming king, he's all the things you want in an athlete, right?
Yeah.
And he came to our leadership camp, and he made a decision of faith while he was there, and he came back, and it was so awesome. And I remember vividly, about midnight on a Friday, he texted me and says, Coach, I invited all the guys to Bible study on Monday. Will you help me? This was last year, in July.
Yeah.
So I was like, yeah. So we started Bible study, and we've been doing that every Wednesday since with the football team.
Wow.
And what I've had happen, we had a young man speak at an event we had a couple of weeks ago, and he said, he grew up and really didn't grow up going to church.
Yeah.
He had a great mom and dad, and had a nice home not far from here. And he said, but we just never really went to church. And Coach Hughes invited me to Bible study. So he said he came, and he started reading his Bible and started finding some verses that meant something to him. And I invited him to come to church with me. And one day at church, he just broke down. And later talked to him about it, and he said, I just started putting all these pieces together, that all these things had happened in my life, and that God was right there, and I just didn't see it.
Yeah.
And he made a decision of faith, and it's just been so awesome to be part of that in some small way.
Dude, but I want you to think about something. those are not little decisions,
No,
guys.
those are big
I mean,
decisions,
we're
yeah.
talking about eternity.
Yep.
We're talking about kids. We're talking about life change for eternity.
Yep.
I mean, that that's what it's about.
Yeah, and this past Sunday I got to baptize a basketball player from the girls basketball team and a young man from a football team. And I'll tell you the story real quick if I can.
Yeah,
So
please.
there's this young man named Connor. So January 2022, I go over to the high school and start working out with the guys. And I was going about every morning. And I was just kind of getting my feet wet and getting started and trying to make connections and build relationships. And I was like, well, I like to work out and figure it's a way that I can connect with kids because I can kind of hang with them in
Yeah.
the weight room,
That's right.
And so I'm working out, and there's this one kid, and he and I just kind of connect from the get go.
Yeah.
And I saw kind of two sides to him, if I'm being honest. And he and I've had this conversation, and he acknowledged, yeah, there were two sides of me, but he just dynamic personality. He's a pretty good football player, and we just started building a relationship, and he graduated. He had a chance to play college football, but he decided he didn't want to play in college. And so through the summer, he and I were having lunches and going to lunch. And one day, I got a text from him, and he said, "Coach, I want to work on growing my relationship with God."
Wow.
And to be honest with you, I hadn't really talked a whole lot to him
Yeah.
about my faith. I was just trying to be an influence.
Sure.
And one of my hopes is I can be a light and people can see that light. And I am vocal, don't get me
Sure.
wrong, but,
Oh yeah.
but I'm just trying to love this kid. And so he texted me that, and I was like, hey, let's have lunch tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so, my objective was, when talking with him, I wanted to figure out where he was at first.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we had a conversation. We're at Chipotle over here in Loganville,
Yeah.
And it's crowded. It's lunchtime, and we're sitting at the middle of the table, and we kind of get to the point where I explained the salvation prayer and how that works, and he smiled, and I said, is that something you want to do? And he says, yeah, I'd like to do that, Coach. And I remember it so vividly, and I said, well, we can do that right now if you want to. And so I took his hand, and he took my hand, and we prayed that prayer right there in Chipotle, man.
Dude.
And, so I baptized him this past Sunday, and I've seen this kid change from where he was when I first met him, and kind of being rough, to be honest with you.
Oh yeah.
To being this light and having this awesome smile, and he told me this is what he says. I feel good, Coach.
Yeah.
I feel better than I've ever felt in my life.
Yeah.
And I know the trajectory of his life has changed.
Yeah, absolutely.
And if all I did was be part of that,
Mm-hmm.
I'm good, Coach.
Yeah.
I'm good with what God had planned for me to do. And if I only had to tell you one story, if I could have Connor sitting here with me, that would be probably one of my top two stories through doing this this work that I'm doing. So
yeah, and you get to do that every day.
Every day.
And it's important because we in our pre-show kind of talking, I was asking you the media out there.
Mm-hmm.
They give this unbelievably woke glimpse, or I would say their myopic view into what they believe youth culture is, and it's all LGBTQ, or everybody's worried about boys, and girls stuff, and all of the different things. And then we've got guys like you out there making a real difference.
Let me say something about that real quick.
Yeah, go ahead,
I don't
please.
mean to cut you off.
No, you go ahead.
One of the things I try to tell people is this. First of all, it's hard to grow up today.
Absolutely.
I was talking with a mother of a 10-year-old football player a couple of weeks ago, and she started to cry and talking about, all that's ahead of this young man.
Yeah.
And I told her, I said, but you're laying a foundation for him.
Yeah.
And that's gonna bode well for him. But what I've learned, Jeff, is there are good kids out there.
Yeah.
And I'm energized every day by the kids that I'm around. And I tell people this when I get a chance to, and I don't mind saying this on this show here. There are two types of people. There are those that get behind their computer keyboard and complain about what's going on in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are those that go do something.
Yeah.
Whatever that is.
Yep.
And my challenge would be to figure out what you can do. You can pray for someone.
Mm-hmm.
You can support someone.
Yeah.
There's some way you can get involved and serve and make a difference.
Yeah.
But what I've learned is that kids are hungry for the truth, and they know they understand fake and what's real.
Yeah.
You know, I brought this statistic I wanted to share. This survey that I read, I think I read this in the USA Today, so I don't know if that makes it legit or not. But it says 83% of Christians make their commitment to Jesus between the ages of 11 and 14.
Mm-hmm.
Another survey said that it's only about 14% probability after age 14, and then it drops significantly to like a 1%, 1 to 6% after 18.
Yeah, those are actually. I was a student pastor for 15 years and worked with teenagers, and then was a juvenile probation officer, things like that. And even back then, those same statistics were very, very close to that.
But the point I want to make is that they're good kids.
Yeah.
They just need somebody to make an impact on their life, and we believe at FCA that there's no greater influence than a coach.
Yeah.
A coach will impact more people in a year than most people will in a lifetime.
I agree.
And the question is, well, what kind of coach,
what
kind of coach is in place there, right? And,
Right.
and the coach can be significant, good or bad.
Yeah.
I had some good coaches and I had some bad coaches, but they can be very significant. And so I think with what I get to do every day, I'm just energized by these young people.
Yeah.
They keep me excited
Yeah.
and healthy and young and eager to get up and go be with them, to be honest with you.
So let me ask you this. Would it be a fair statement to say that you believe most kids are a blank slate, and for the most part, what people are writing into their lives on that slate kind of determines where they're going, what they're thinking, it kind of shapes their worldview?
I'm no expert on this, so I would just say it probably a lot of different factors. I mean, there's some kids that use bad things going on in their life to make them just quit life.
Yeah.
And then there are some kids in life that use that to get them out of their situation and go do great things.
Yeah.
I don't know what the answer is, but this is a lot of different factors. But I think there's an opportunity to be a significant influence in their lives.
Yeah.
And I'll just go back to what I said earlier. They are looking for the truth.
Yeah.
I get a lot of times, "Hey, coach, can I ask you a question?" And then I never know what they're going to say next.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's everything from do you believe in dinosaurs to how do you go to heaven? Everything in between.
Yeah.
And so I don't know if that's
It's
a
a
good
wide
answer,
range, dude.
but I think that kids are searching for the truth, and
Somebody's going to feed it too.
somebody's going
to feed their version of the truth. And I'm going to tell you something. Having guys in there like you that are feeding the truth, because look, let's just be honest. Kids are assaulted from now kindergarten with ideologies that are completely antithetic to God. I mean, there is, for the most part, we teach evolution, we teach all kinds of different things. And so the assault on kids, what they watch on TV, now they're being assaulted with the LGBTQ crowd, transgender thing. And it's even in the cartoons, dude.
And what they listen to,
and what they listen, what they listen to, what you hear in that weight room too. I'm like, whoa, because I went out there last year was with every intention of getting involved, and then ended up traveling for the next 6 months. However that happened, but ended up traveling for work, and then was not able to get out there for one time when I was able to come out with you the other day.
Just getting started the last time time you came,
So I think that was a God thing, because God really let you get in there and get established. That's really so cool, man. It's really neat to see. Now you've had a coaching change at that high school. And you've had to kind of start all over with another coaching staff.
So, and it's been good. I mean, Coach Cathcart's a great coach, and I think he's going to be good for logo of football, and I've gotten to know other coaches like Coach Andrews over at Walton County and Coach Murphy at LCA. I mean, the list is long of the football guys and all the coaches. It's really been a blessing for me because everybody's been so welcoming to let me come in, and you know, I get to speak. I do this thing called Athlete of the Week, and when I do that, I come in and I share a little message. And you know, I've spoke to the cheerleading teams and the cross country teams and the volleyball teams and even the band. The band, I've come in and spoken with them. But I'm really blessed in Walton County with the coaches. One thing I love to share with you, I'd be remiss if I didn't, Jeff. Is
please.
You've been awfully nice and complimentary, and I just got to say I'm not that great. I'm not that great. I serve a great God.
Yeah, that's right.
And through Him, again, I've learned to challenge myself and to put myself out there and to grow. But I'm constantly reminded, not that I'm Moses, but remember what Moses said when God spoke to him in the burning bush? You know, who am I?
Yeah.
And I love what God said, and it's one of my theme verses. He said, "I will be with you."
Yeah.
You know, and for me, that gives me comfort.
Yeah.
So I'm not that great a guy. I'm not a great speaker. I mean, I'm not a biblical scholar. I'm no pastor by any means, like you. And oftentimes I have an opportunity to speak, and I'm like, oh man, what am I going to say? And am I good enough to do this? And then I'll stop.
I do that every time.
Yeah, I'll say, God, will you just let the Holy Spirit speak through me today? And I did that before I came in here today. You know, so I just felt like I needed to stress that. I appreciate how complimentary you've been, but I will say I hope my story maybe inspires some other people. You know, I wish, honestly, there are times I wish I was 20 or 30. You know, when I get to do the coolest stuff every day. You know, but sometimes, man, I wish I could run routes with the guys or whatever. But you know, my legs aren't what they used to be. I still move around pretty good, but I knew that God's timing, like you talked about, was right, and He's used all of my years of experience to equip me. You know, I've had coaches come up to me and ask me all kinds of questions that my business experience have helped me be able to answer. So that just confirmed for me that God's timing was right. But I do hope that, you know, maybe someone will hear this and say, well, you know, maybe I should give that prayer a chance. You know, again, one of the things that I've learned is when you fully commit, you know, God will fully fulfill you. And it's a pretty special place to be. So.
Well, Jeff, man, that is an awesome, awesome story. And just remember this, guys. God builds your life story, which means if you're still breathing, you're still living life, and God is still building your story. And if you're out there and you're like, dude, don't like all this God talk, all that other stuff, man, I want to challenge you. Investigate God, man. Find out. Say, God, you know what? I don't even know if you're real. You know, all this Jesus stuff, I don't even know if you're real. You know what? I got news for you. God is a big God. He's not scared of your questions.
No.
And the one thing I do know is that Jesus loves you, and He died for you, and He has a plan for your life, and your life is not over. And Jeff, thank you so much for coming in. Man, what a wonderful story. And it's nice to actually hear God still using you, and God still doing really cool things in your life. And it's all because of that prayer. God, I'm here. I'm available. Really, use me. And God said, okay, remember this. All God wants is a usable person, somebody that will say, God, I can't, but I know you can. And then guess what? God will. All right, guys, thank you for coming in. Remember, this is Impact.
The Impact. Living